just do not have the requisite data that says when work comes in, what capabilities does that work need in order to create a quality outcome for the client or the stakeholder?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're back. Welcome to the Enterprise Content Show.
Welcome. Hello again. We're getting into a topic today that sits right at the intersection of people, process, and technology, the future of HR.
I'd like to talk about your future.
Woo! Because
Very
a lot of
interesting
organizations would say their HR is modern, but if you look underneath, the reality for all of us can be a little bit messier, right? The systems might be modern, but the workflows, the documents, and information gaps are often telling a different story.
And that's exactly why this conversation is a good one, because we're talking about what a new HR operating system really looks like, especially in a world where AI is changing expectations super fast.
Love it, Franzi. And joining us today is Perry Timms, speaker, thinker, consultant, and someone who spent a lot of time working with and challenging how HR is designed, how it creates value, how it thinks about itself, and how it needs to evolve for both people and the business. And there he is.
Welcome, Perry.
Yeah, great to be here. What an intro. I just am full of enthusiasm already.
Yes, me too. And I can tell Franzi is. Perry, it's awesome to have you here. So you have this phrase and this topic that you talk a lot about, which is like the new HR operating system. Maybe just to level set people, like what's broken in the old system?
Wow, geez, what a start.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So I think you're right when you hit on the technology that might sit on the outside. So visibly, it might look like HR is in the 21st century, but I think you're right then, what sits underneath it is almost like tablets of stone. So, I mean, it is really built on employment law and practices that are still a hangover from the industrial age, no matter how much we try and put a digital wraparound to that. But you haven't really sort of mentioned in great detail, although you gave a note in passing mention to it about artificial intelligence and automation. Technology is absolutely thrashing around inside organizational operating systems, business models, customer expectation. So I think the time has now come to go. This industrial relic that has a digital wraparound can no longer service and function modern enterprises, not just from a content point of view, but from the value and the impact that you talked about, Will. So what better time to think about an HR operating model and system than when the system around it is thrashing and re-establishing itself? We are just going to be on a hide into nothing if we continue along the linearity and the traditional routes that we've taken so far as a people profession, when we are now talking about a much more complex world, a much more pacey, shortened cycles, learning curves, and that calls us into action in a very different way. So I guess the timing is absolutely right. When I started to conceive this, ChatGPT wasn't even out, and then as soon as it came out, it's like, wow, the whole world has changed on a dime.
Times have changed, my friends. Times have changed.
Love it.
Yeah. Perry, do you think that part of the problem is that HR, as you said, has digitized some of the work and some of the function, and that's exactly what you were referring to, has not completely really redesigned the work itself?
Yeah, I think if we look at the way customer service has kind of been reframed around both personas and journeys into a customer experience, we know differently now about how we service a market, how we interpret signals, how we understand what customers want. And inside the organization, the people experience is still like a kind of a raging teenager. It hasn't grown up, it hasn't understood what it's there for. So we've still been playing like an organizational nanny role, when really we ought to start thinking about liberating adults into their best potential. So it's a mindset thing, but also it's incredibly enshrined in process that we haven't really addressed for decades, and now we can't avoid it. Franzi, we are being called into a very, very different paradigm.
Yeah,
super totally interesting. And I guess, we won't get too quickly into this, Perry, but there's this kind of bridge between what we do at Doxis and the world that you're immersed in and consult people on.
Yeah.
And in there's paperwork, and there's this phrase that we have, which is that HR is about people, not paperwork, and that a lot of the challenges that organizations have aren't filing problems, they're like structural gaps. And I'm just curious, does that resonate with how you see HR today? Like what are you seeing when on the front line, when you engage with people? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I do use two words that begin with I in the way that you just described, actually. So I talk about the intelligence that HR teams rely on, need, and can gather and use. And the answer to that is often those kind of paper trails that you talk about, and even if they're converted into digital entities, are never aggregated into the other I, which is insight. They just sit there as almost like flat repositories of information that doesn't get mined and drawn out. So we talk about something where we might want to start using that intelligence to be a bit preemptive about an experiment we might want to cast, or some new service that we think we need to introduce, whether it's well-being or benefits or whatever. And we just cannot extract that intelligence from its flat form. We haven't indexed it, we haven't used it. So there's definitely something about a paucity of that at the moment. So what do we rely on? Anecdote and conversation, which are helpful, don't get me wrong. But if we had a way to extract that intelligence to create insight, we would be able to shorten the curves and the predictability of what we want to put out into the world, because we could test it with that intelligence, but we just don't. So there's a real flaw in the approach there. So before we even put an AI layer on anything, we are dealing with information that is hidden, that is difficult to tabulate, that we just cannot use in the way we want to.
Yeah.
You're nodding. I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, we have, it's very clear, and we're dealing with those kind of challenges, I would say, in everyday life, as we see those huge HR transformation projects at the moment, even like at enterprise level, and they are all reporting similar challenges, as you just said. And that is exactly like, where do you see the gap most clearly at the moment between what HR says it wants to be and how it actually operates today? Because I do feel that there is a huge gap at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are a number of gaps. And in the UK, we have a problem at the moment with potholes in the roads not being filled in. And HR is the equivalent. Potholes all over its own kind of process and delivery mechanism. So they're kind of patching a few, but they're not really resurfacing the road, Franzi, in the way that you described. So I'll give you an example of where I think this comes into play. Workforce planning, workforce intelligence, and work design. We just do not have the requisite data that says when work comes in, what capabilities does that work need in order to create a quality outcome for the client or the stakeholder? And therefore, where does that capability sit? And that's in a part of the organization or in specific roles. And then who has that capability, so that we can allocate them to the work, and we don't over allocate them or under allocate them. We sensibly allocate them to it. We just cannot do that. We go from work to the individual without all those really important middle steps about the capabilities and the strength of those capabilities and where they sit, not just in because we know John can do that kind of work. We kind of go, John, that's your job now. It's like, that's a kind of cottage industry, not an enterprise solution. So we're dealing with that, again, kind of 20th century industrial throwback, when really we ought to be making some very sophisticated decisions about how we resource work that comes in and how we can then spot the trends of where we haven't got the capability and we need to build it. Again, it comes back to that intelligence thing. So there's an example, Franzi, there, where we are dealing very inefficiently with something, and therefore the outcomes are largely less effective than they could be. And everybody's working hard, but they're working in a system that isn't working for them.
It's just so many little nuggets here, Perry, that I'm absolutely loving. So if you see me grinning, that's why. So Perry, loving the conversation, and you touched on this earlier about AI. There's a huge amount of excitement around AI in HR, but also a lot of noise. Just in a kind of really punchy way, like what do you see, or how do you see AI changing the HR operating model itself?
Yeah. So it's not how it is perceived at the moment, which is almost like a training capability and even ethics solution. It is much further left into the work design and the flow and the throughput that changes the dynamic of what work people do and what work machines do. We simply have not got that kind of thinking right now. So that is creating noise.
Super, super interesting. Makes me think about the big famous company that moved agents under the chief HR officer or the AI strategy. That's so interesting, your answer there,
Yeah.
Perry. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
May I just throw in one quick side question? Because you mentioned in pre-AI built HR team, have you seen the change in the composition of HR teams based on AI impact?
Some I have. So they're not taking it as a technologist solution, but they are doing things like analysts who can pick up the data trails and use them much more smartly in the flow of work. But I've got one client in pharma who has started to create some semi-agentic solutions. So they're like cards on their GPT because they're standard queries that they don't need them to go into depth with. It's like, do you want to know about this? Here's the answer. And then it signposts them to an HRIS if they need to do some input. That level of recognizing the kind of queries that people want, that normally they'd pick up a phone or send an email through, has reduced their throughput by 80% so they can do higher caliber, higher quality, more strategic work. So that's what I mean by a sort of a post-AI HR model. It knows what automation looks like and it knows what the higher level quality then transpires from it.
That makes sense, because that is also one of the tensions that we see with the HR systems. Because in the end, it's still managing personal data. A lot of HR work still runs on documents, approval, correspondence, document generation, contract signing, confirmation of work, things like that. And that if the workflow is disconnected, then we're far behind a point where we would talk about predictive workforce planning or things. Then it's like the basics, the foundation that is still not really connected.
Yeah, and I think some of that documentation that might exist, let's say for a legal reason or some other kind of auditable process, you can still make slicker and smarter by giving your user upfront exactly why they're filling in that form, exactly what that form's being used for, and how they do that with the most appropriate level of data input that we can then reuse. And we don't do that. We just expect them to work it out in the flow. No, let's give them help to increase the chance that that data becomes useful for us.
There was a moment earlier, Perry, where I was stunned into silence, and it was because what you said was so perfect for what Doxis does that I actually didn't know how to say anything without everyone thinking, oh, there's the marketing guy being, marketing-y. Let's talk about the quality of underlying information and how that enables this transformation you're talking about. We've seen estimates that 70 to 90% of enterprise information is unstructured, and that a big share of AI projects fail without AI-ready data. So are organizations trying to layer intelligence on top of sort of fundamental disorders that you see, or how would you characterize?
Yeah, they are, Will, and it's a kind of high entropic state of that data, which is leading them to have fragmented processes and actually almost like more painful processes. So I've seen some people who've introduced this into an HR arena, and the users go, that's more complex than it used to be, because they're using it to try and tidy up the data. Well, they would have been better off just saying to people, it's a little bit of pain for a lot of gain down the line. This is why we need you to do it this way, but they don't. So I think there's definitely something about the house in order type of feel that could come and should come from that. But I think it also talks to a fundamental need to change the way that HR itself processes and builds its own information. It still locks it into little silos: people operations, business partners, L&D, ER, reward. It's like islands of information. They should have a massively centralized repository of stuff they all draw on and put into, and it's less role dependent, it is more outcome dependent. And that's why I've built a model where there's very little roles and there's more domains than silos, because that's the only way we're going to address that, not just through technology, but through fundamental reorganizing of how HR kind of does its throughput.
Yeah, we could help with that. We do have a platform who can solve most of their problems. Yeah. And creating that wisdom. I think that's like connecting information, making access easy.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah,
don't want to we don't want to go into the marketing
no, you
pitch.
don't have to. But I think that is such an important point to talk about wisdom, because we often talk about data and knowledge, and we talk about information and having it as an asset. But it's almost like, so what for? It's so that you can create wisdom to make better decisions about what you do with people, what performance really looks like, what learning is on the horizon, and so on. So how on earth can we close a skill gap when we don't even know what skills we've got now? Totally
Absolutely
endless.
correct. We talk a lot about like automation and bringing the machines to do the work for us. Where do you see being human becomes more important?
Yeah, so I've got this phrase where we often see, and McKinsey did a paper, they called it the agentic organization, and it left me cold because it was like the Matrix, where we are just literally click through agents. We're not doing any cognitively additional work. That's not what this is about. So to your point there, I think we know there is a point where the machines kind of stop being as effective as they can, and we come in for variables, imaginative thinking, and just contextualizing stuff. So judgment and critical thinking are absolutely part of what will still be ours. So I think there's something about how we know there's a sort of threshold for automation that then kicks us in. But what it is, it's not a human in the loop, it's the system in the loop, and we're acting in the interests of the system. So we are not thinking, I'm a bit paranoid, so I want to check every bot's output. No, the system says 98% of this is going to be spot on. So you're there to help understand what that 2% variable is as a risk to manage. That's the system, not your preference, not your capability, you acting in the interests of the system. I think the more we get that right, Francie, the more we're likely to see people not get hooked on jobs, but think about what they're doing to add value in the system.
Makes sense. One last question from my side on the AI parks. Yeah, we could talk about that for hours, of course, but I know that we have a limited amount of questions. What do you think about AI in recruiting?
Ooh. Enormously powerful. I mean, it has such potential. I mean, I've seen some of the tools that have been developed that are very conversational. They'll call people up, they'll talk them through some kind of assessment. It sounds like a human being. And all of that is really good, because what you can do there is you can say, at mass, we can give people a very consistent level of experience that actually we can also tailor for neurodiversity and cultural difference, because the machine can sort of help adapt to that. And we can take that as a first part data input exercise for us to then start going into human judgment and relational kind of stuff that we'd want to do as a human. So I think all the time TA has been this massive funnel we've been trying to narrow to make the right choice on candidate that we then put forward for the role. I think machines can help us so much with that, but we can't outsource the whole thing, because the attachment that people have to the role and to their team and so on is such a human thing. You cannot digitize or sanitize that.
We're actually all one and connected.
That's part of a, do we get you, do you get us, can we work it out, is it feeling like the right kind of thing? Sounds really contrived and almost like, why on earth would you base it on that? Recruiting is the most important decision you make. Your value proposition is set, your branding is set, and it changes as you need to. But recruiting who you bring in, that's who you become. So we can't rely on machines to do that, but we can't rely on humans to do it either, because it's just too complex a game. And we need to kind of think about the best way to sort of differentiate human input and machine input. Ultimately, I think it comes down to this relational sense of, are you here for the value that we're creating in the world, and what do you value, and let's work out how we make that part of the deal. So I think it will change enormously, Francie. Testing, everything changes. Probably we won't recognize it in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you, Perry. So where this is leading me, Perry, is thinking about picking up on your point there. Like, where do HR people still add the most irreplaceable value? Like, what is the unshakable human in the loop in the modern team?
Yeah. It's a lovely question, because I think it manifests in a couple of areas. I think not just in the how we go out to the world to say, hey, you want to come work for us because we're one of those employers that you're going to be thinking, wow, I get paid to do this. So I think there's that. But I think it's more about connecting more deeply to a sense of purpose and a sense of value that people want to create in the world. They just happen to be able to do it through you as an employer. And this sense that actually you might not be there forever. like this job forever thing has become a little bit of a sort of lamented thing from the past. It's almost like, but do we really want that, or do we really want people who look at their career as a journey and they'll hop around?
Support me in this journey, please.
And if you're good enough, they'll come back with so much more than they would have done if they stayed with you. So I think there is something about this lockdown thing of a job. I think that will become less of a consideration for the people side. So we won't be looking at employee retention just as some kind of psychological prison. We'll be saying, if you want to go with a blessing, but like help us find out who could come in your stead and what you're going to go away and learn and what you can share with us. So more like alumni thing. So I think the relationship is going to change. It's not going to end when it normally does. I think there's a continuance and there's a different version of it that's likely to come back in. So we've talked about boomerang employees and all that. I think they're a little bit under sophisticated. I think the relationship with, I want to do something good in the world, you do good in the world, let's do what we can and see where it goes. It will feel much more like that, almost like a sort of theatrical production or a box set.
Very cool. Love that. So, Perry, the really important part of the impact of all of this is stakeholders and where traction and impact is created. And we're curious to understand, if HR's operating model is fragmented, like who feels that first in this current world? Is it employees? Is it managers? Is it HR teams? Or is it maybe the business?
Yeah, I think it would be a little trickle of succession. I think managers would feel it first, because I think we're finally going to break this dependency that managers have on us to bail them out of people management responsibilities because they're very busy with their projects and their workloads and so on. I think they'll go, oh, wow. And then it's like, hang on, that's what I'm supposed to be here for, isn't it? So this whole team leading thing will hit them first. I think the next wave will then be employees who'll be like, oh, wow, what's HR doing? It's pulling more performance levers. It's giving me more certainty. It's giving me more choice. It's giving me more intelligence. Wow, what's happened there? So I think they'll be pleasantly surprised, but also a bit suspicious. And then I think the strategic leaders will pick it up next. And I think that's the pathway then out to customers, to shareholders, and to citizens if it's a government or a non-profit. Because I think there'll be this trickle out where people will go, why are they emitting such nice noises and doing such nice things? And they'll look at the almost like the HR impact and go, wow, I never knew HR could do that much. I thought it just held it tight and steady and legal. But it's almost like creating a liberating force for good. Because I think things like ESG and the whole sense of what the planet needs, HR's footprint will be throughout that, I think, because it has to be. That's a stakeholder to it that it will need to service in its work design, in its employment proposition, in every walk of life. So I think Dave Ulrich has this phrase like, HR is not about HR, it's about inside out and outside in. I think there's a dawning that HR won't be so inside. It will be much more visible outside, because it has to be.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's way more outside, or received from the outside, or has an impact on the outside and the broader business than you might expect at the first sight. And this is also like when I come back to the documents and the disconnected workflows, we all know that they will, of course, create admin pain and they take time. And you have confirmed that as well. They affect the onboarding. They have an impact on compliance, on productivity. So ultimately on the business and the success of the business in the end. And we have also talked about the onboarding in a bit more detail, as this is, at least as we see, a very crucial process when you start a new job at a new company. And that is, I wouldn't say most of the times, but pretty often not going too well. I think there's only a few companies who have really great onboarding processes. The day-to-day business workflow can have a huge impact on employee satisfaction.
Totally agree with you. And, you know, I remember in the early 2000s being part of some group of people, Orange Telecom was one of them, so it shows you how long ago that was, who were trying to really, really improve onboarding and induction, as it was called. And we still haven't. It's still ridiculously painful, inappropriate. Often it's 2 days talking heads with directors you'll never see, bored out your life, forgetting everything. I'm bored. So this whole sense of how do we get people into a workplace so they feel it and they know that they're making a contribution as soon as possible. Well, you don't do it how we're doing it now. And I think the other important thing you've tapped into there, Franzi, is the fact that entry-level jobs already are starting to decline. Graduate schemes intakes are down. This is the work that's being automated. So that entry point that used to be almost like the sort of longer tail version of onboarding is gone. So therefore, we're getting people in at a higher level with more judgment, more criticality, more relational building. Like we've got to take onboarding seriously, because they might be coming out from a career break or university straight into a world of work now at a much higher and intense level. We can't just do how we're doing it now. It's got to be, here's the information, here's how work flows, here's where you find things out, here's where you build your own journey, here's how you know who you need to know. And that becomes like a learner-led exploration. I think it'll almost be like a kind of a boot camp for about 6 months to get into it. And if you're doing that on information that's scattered, good luck, because they'll be lost. They'll be in a maze before they've even started.
Yeah, and even as you said, it's the more expensive people that you hire at the moment. It's not the first job takers who are entering the business ecosystem. They have maybe not that expectations, but you pay a lot of money to even recruit those roles and get them to sign with your company.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So the experience of them both pre and as soon as they land, if their information again is scattered, difficult to find out, and unqueryable, they're going to be relying on people gophering away and who do I need to know, and it all suddenly becomes very almost like sort of even pre-industrial. It's like we shouldn't be able to have to suffer that. We should be able to just tap into, what do I need to know, where can I find, how can I do, and then boom, that's when the information really comes to life, because it's giving people agency instead of a headache.
Yeah, that's why I'm here for 12 years now. I never wanted to do the onboarding part again.
Oh man, yeah. But there's something serious about a re-onboarding, because it is almost like there's something about, where is the company now? What is going on now? And it's almost like we are sort of re-onboarding. We just don't call it that.
100% agree. We were talking about this as a leadership team, actually, not right. So long ago. Okay. I really think that we should re-onboard everyone in the company, because we're a different company to the one that we were. We all totally joined. Agree. So now we're going to do everyone's favorite section. This is called Ducks It Like It's Hard. Ducks It Like It's Hard. And it's rapid fire, quick, practical, instinctive answers, Perry. 3, 2, 1. Franzi's going to kick off with the first one. Go, Franzi!
Number one sign an HR model is outdated.
That people still talk about process only.
One thing HR should stop trading as admin and start trading as infrastructure.
Oh, that we capture intelligence about what talent really is regularly.
That is a super cool answer. All right, next one. One reason AI in HR could under-deliver.
That we still look at it as a tool, not as the fabric of how we work.
Nice one. Next one stakeholder pain point that leaders underestimate.
I think that's we think we know what customers feel, but we only know what they buy.
Perry, I'm going to call you every morning and do this. This is so much fun. One capability every future HR team needs.
Product thinking. We just make products all the time. So let's do more of that.
And one last one myth about people and business performance.
That it's all about intellect. It's all about smartness, but also imagination and stamina.
Go, 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 go. Dig, 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 dig. Ah, yes.
That was
Absolutely perfect. I knew this would be good, and it's been even better.
Oh, man. Gosh, I loved it too, man. Yeah.
Perry, before we wrap up, tell us about your book.
For about 30 years, the dominant HR operating model hasn't even really been called that. Is the Ulrich model of shared service business partners and centers of excellence. And you look everywhere, whatever size and denomination, and everybody defines it differently, which is kind of okay. But it was built in the 1990s when the world was very different. So we haven't had a different one. I did some research and found that lots of consultancies built more complex versions of it that nobody would like anyway. So I just thought, let's go to the essence of what HR teams are kind of playing with as well as sort of delivering through. And obviously process was hot, right? People operations, you absolutely can't not have that stuff functioning well. But the products thing is lacking, and that's why I'll put that in next. But then it's completely and utterly amplified by a massively strong awareness of the systems you're building, the systems you're in, the systems you're using, and then the science we need, the science we have, the science we don't use, the science that's emerging. So I put those four together, put it out to some chief people officers and HR practitioners I trusted, who came back and went, "Ooh, wow, I like it." But like, how do I do it? I'm like, well, the fact that you like it is good enough. So I then built on it after that. And so far, I've been able to bring it into a few clients. They don't show me that model I've built. They show me their people experience journey and the impact they have on the top of it. That to me means the operating model is doing exactly what it should be doing. It's not the dominant force. It's the thing that underpins it and powers it.
Absolutely love it. You're a legend. Perry, thank you so much.
Thank you. Gosh, yeah. Can we do this again?
Yeah,
anytime, of course, anytime.
Right, ciao for now.
Bye-bye. Really thoughtful conversation. I really loved that.
It was great, wasn't it? I think what really stood out was, well, everything, but fundamentally, I loved it when Perry was talking about fabric and the model and the rethinking the whole operating system underneath, like how information flows and how HR creates value for employees and the business in this future world. So super cool.
Yeah, but also like in that landed for me, like always, of course, because I don't like when the foundation is not digital and connected, that there is no modern HR if you do not solve the challenges on the foundation. And then you can think about AI, and then you can think about moving further and doing crazy good things. But yeah, you got to take care of the root business first.
Love it. So thanks to Perry again for joining us.
And thank you all for listening to the Enterprise Content Show.
Yep. And I'm going to pretend to be a YouTuber now and say, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, like, share this with someone in HR, transformation or digital workplace. We would love them to connect with these ideas. And of course, they probably already know Perry's work. See you next time. And remember, your HR is modern. Your documents might not be. Store them somewhere safe. We can help. And look after yourself. Keep your content. What do we normally say, Francie?
Juicy, fresh, and hot, and smart.
There we go.
Overall.
That's it. Excellent.
Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Over and out. Bye.